Claire Bennett had always believed her life was steady, predictable, and safe. She lived in a small lakeside town called Maple Harbor, a place where everyone knew each other's birthdays, favorite coffee shops, and weekend plans. Her home was modest but warm, a white clapboard house with flower boxes that she kept bright with geraniums and tulips. She taught literature at the local college, a job that suited her quiet, thoughtful nature. On the surface, her life seemed peaceful. She had been married to Daniel for over a decade, and together they built a life that others often envied. Lately, there had been a restlessness inside her, an emptiness she couldn't name. The morning she first noticed the change, Claire woke before dawn. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of the lake and pine trees. Daniel was still asleep upstairs, unaware that Claire had slipped on her coat and walked down to the pier. The water stretched endlessly, calm and reflective. Claire leaned against the railing, watching tiny ripples catch the first hints of light. She felt the quiet weight of her own thoughts, a heaviness she hadn't recognized before. She tried to tell herself she was being dramatic, that every long marriage had these moments. But the silence around her only seemed louder than it should. It was in that stillness that Ethan Walker arrived in Maple Harbor. Ethan was from Vancouver, a city of constant rain and crowded streets, far from the quiet of Maple Harbor. He had come to inherit his late aunt's house, an old Victorian that had been empty for years. The windows were dusty, the floorboards creaked, and the smell of old wood filled the air. He unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. The house was a mess, but it was his responsibility now. And it was here, in this quiet town where strangers were rare, that fate would begin weaving its threads. Claire first met Ethan by chance. She had been walking through town running errands when she noticed a man struggling with a map outside the hardware store. His jacket was damp from the morning mist, his hair falling slightly into his eyes. Something about the way he hesitated, looking at the directions as if unsure where to begin, made her pause. Claire approached, offering help, her voice gentle. "Do you need some directions?" she asked. Ethan looked up, surprised, and then smiled a smile that was easy, warm, and unguarded. He accepted her guidance, thanked her, and that was it. A brief exchange, polite and ordinary. Yet Claire felt a strange flutter in her chest she didn't expect. After that, she began noticing him more often. At the cafe where she graded student papers, he appeared searching for coffee. At the library, he browsed the history section, lingering over old maps and local records. Their conversations were short, polite at first, revolving around everyday things: weather, shops, the quirks of a small town. Ethan never pressed for personal details, but he asked questions with genuine curiosity. Claire noticed the way he listened, fully attentive, without rushing her answers. It was rare for someone to care so quietly, so respectfully. Meanwhile, her marriage with Daniel was drifting further into routine. He was not cruel or dismissive, but he had become distant, more concerned with work and future plans than with the quiet tension that had begun to fill their home. They spoke about bills, errands, and trivial matters. Discussions about dreams, hopes, or fears had faded like whispers in an empty room. Claire often felt alone even when he was sitting across the table. She told herself this was normal, that long marriages sometimes settled into a quiet coexistence, and that this silence was acceptable. One rainy afternoon, the town experienced a sudden storm. The cafe's power went out, candles lit, the wind tapping at the windows. Claire had been grading papers when Ethan walked in, drenched, shaking rain from his jacket. He laughed at the situation, and Claire joined in, offering him a warm cup of tea. That evening, their conversation felt effortless. They talked about books, about the town, about small personal histories. Ethan spoke softly of loss and change, and Claire found herself sharing memories of teaching, of students who had inspired her, and of moments when she had felt invisible even within her own home. For the first time in years, her words found a listener who understood. When the lights flickered back on, reality intruded. Ethan thanked her for her company and they parted ways. Claire walked home with a strange heaviness in her chest, both comforting and unsettling. That night, Daniel noticed her unusual silence and asked if she was tired. She nodded, said yes, and retreated to her bedroom. Alone, she stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying small gestures, half smiles, and quiet conversations with Ethan. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Nothing had happened. She was loyal, she was married. But the flutter in her chest persisted, insistent and new. Days turned into weeks. Ethan's presence became more noticeable, though nothing inappropriate occurred. They would see each other at the farmer's market, exchange friendly greetings, and sometimes walk along the lake discussing trivial matters. The connection grew silently in shared glances, in understanding smiles. Claire found herself lingering on conversations, replaying moments in her mind. She began to notice how alive she felt around him, how he brought out thoughts and feelings she had buried long ago. He never crossed boundaries, yet the bond between them was undeniable. One evening, as autumn crept into Maple Harbor, Claire went to the pier again. She felt drawn to that place, a quiet sanctuary where she could face her thoughts. Ethan arrived soon after, walking quietly along the water. They sat side by side, the space between them respectful, but charged with unspoken truths. Claire spoke about her life with Daniel, the distance that had grown, the unspoken sadness she carried. Ethan listened without judgment, nodding and acknowledging her feelings. He did not offer solutions or advice. He simply was there, steady presence she could rely on for just a short while. Claire left that evening with a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because she had someone who understood her, and sorrow because she knew nothing could change her obligations, her loyalty, or the life she had built with Daniel. She was caught between gratitude for the connection she had found and guilt for the feelings it awakened. Ethan was not her husband. He was a stranger, a gentle presence, and yet, in quiet ways, he had begun to stir emotions that she thought had long disappeared. The storm of feelings inside her intensified over the next few days. She noticed herself looking for him in town, lingering when she saw him. Her mind wandered to conversations and shared laughter. She questioned her marriage not out of desire to leave, but out of confusion about who she had become and what she had been missing. The quiet life she had believed in now felt heavy, incomplete. Ethan, unknowingly, had become a mirror reflecting who she was beneath the surface, self she had long neglected. One afternoon, while grading papers at the library, she found herself imagining scenarios she would never act on, conversations they might have, dreams they could share. Each thought carried both thrill and guilt. She reminded herself that her loyalty lay with Daniel, that Ethan's role was temporary, a fleeting interruption in her ordinary life. Yet the more she tried to suppress these feelings, the stronger they became. Their friendship deepened, carefully, without crossing lines. Ethan spoke of his past in Vancouver, the loss of his aunt, the reasons he had left the city. He shared stories of loneliness and hope, and Claire found herself confiding small truths she hadn't told anyone else. They built a delicate trust, fragile yet meaningful. No words were said that could disrupt her marriage, but the emotional connection was undeniable. A current that pulled quietly under the surface of her life. By the time autumn fully arrived, Claire realized that something fundamental had shifted. Her life with Daniel had remained safe, predictable, and stable, yet her heart now felt a stirring it could not ignore. She did not know where it would lead or what decisions she might face in the coming months. All she knew was that fate had introduced Ethan into her world, and nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The first part of her story ends not with a dramatic choice, but with recognition that life had layers she could not control, emotions that could not be ignored, and connections that would leave lasting marks. Claire understood that she was standing on the threshold of change, one that could redefine her understanding of love, loyalty, and what it truly meant to feel alive. She looked at the lake, the water reflecting the soft gold of the autumn sun, and realized she was not the same woman who had arrived that morning. Something new had begun, something delicate, urgent, and impossible to ignore. And so Maple Harbor held its breath, waiting for the next chapter in a story that Claire could never have predicted. Fate had plans beyond what she imagined, and her heart, cautious yet curious, would have to follow. Autumn had settled deeply over Maple Harbor, painting the town in rich shades of gold, orange, and crimson. The mornings were crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the cool lake air. Claire Bennett found herself walking along the pier, almost daily, drawn to its quiet solitude, to the way the water reflected the sky and the shifting seasons. Life with Daniel continued in its careful routine. He was still kind and respectful, but the warmth they once shared seemed distant, buried under years of obligations, routines, and unspoken compromises. Ethan Walker remained in Maple Harbor, the repairs on his aunt's old Victorian taking longer than expected. Each day he stayed, each hour he spent unpacking memories and fixing creaky floors, he became more familiar, more intertwined with the town and with Claire's life, though neither of them crossed the lines they both understood. Their encounters were never planned. They happened in small ways: a shared bench at the park, a wave at the grocery store, a brief conversation at the library. Each time, Claire felt the quiet pull of connection, subtle yet undeniable. One afternoon, Claire was grading essays at night at the cafe when she noticed Ethan sitting across the room, a notebook open in front of him. She felt the familiar stir of emotions, a mixture of comfort and something she could not name. He glanced up, their eyes met, and for a moment, the world shrank to that shared space. He smiled briefly, respectful, warm, and the connection hummed quietly between them. She returned to her work, telling herself firmly that nothing inappropriate had occurred. She was loyal, she was married. And yet, her heart was awakening in ways she hadn't anticipated. Weeks passed, and the town felt alive with autumn celebrations. The annual Maple Harvest Festival was approaching, and the streets were decorated with pumpkins, garlands, and lights. Claire found herself volunteering at the library booth, arranging books for display. To her surprise, Ethan appeared to help, carrying boxes of donated novels and chatting about the festival's traditions. Their conversation flowed easily, unforced, and the hours passed faster than either expected. By the end of the day, the sun had dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and lavender. They walked together to the pier, talking quietly about life, loss, and small dreams. "I never thought I'd feel at home in a town like this," Ethan admitted, his voice low, almost shy. "But somehow it's growing on me." Claire nodded, looking out at the lake. "It has a way of changing you," she said softly, "by making you notice things you didn't before. Quiet moments, small acts of kindness, the people around you, even strangers." Ethan's gaze lingered on her face, thoughtful, appreciative. "Even me?" He asked a subtle question hidden in the pause. Claire smiled faintly, uncertain. "Especially you," she admitted, almost whispering. The words hung in the air between them, charged and delicate. They were careful, aware of boundaries, yet the honesty was intoxicating. Later that week, Claire received unexpected news. Daniel had been offered a promotion at his company, a transfer to Chicago with a higher position and a fresh start. He was thrilled, talking about new offices, new colleagues, new opportunities. Claire felt a strange mix of pride and apprehension. This was supposed to be good news, a step forward for both of them. But the thought of leaving Maple Harbor, leaving the pier, the lake, and even Ethan, stirred an unexpected ache in her chest. She told Daniel she was happy for him, smiled through the conversation, but when she was alone, tears came unbidden. That evening, Claire walked along the lake, wrapped in her coat against the chill. She found Ethan sitting quietly on a bench, staring at the water. He didn't speak at first, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Finally, Claire sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching, the cool air carrying the faint scent of pine and water. "I got news today," Claire began cautiously. "Daniel, he's going to Chicago. They offered him a promotion." Ethan listened, expression calm but attentive, eyes following the gentle movement of the waves. "That's big news," he said. "I'm glad for him." His voice carried no judgment, only honesty. But Claire noticed the subtle weight in his tone, the quiet acknowledgement that this would change everything. Claire hesitated, then admitted something she had buried. "I don't know who I am anymore. I feel loyal, but I also feel lost. I feel like I've been living the life I built, but not the life I want." Ethan didn't offer solutions or tell her what to do. He simply nodded, understanding without interference. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "fate doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers. It waits until you're ready to notice it." The night deepened around them, the water reflecting the moonlight. Neither spoke again for a long while, just sitting side by side, sharing the quiet. Claire realized that the world could be full of gentle, invisible currents, connections that didn't need words and yet shaped everything. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Claire helped Daniel pack, attending to practical details while her mind drifted to Ethan. Their brief encounters in town became more poignant, each glance heavier with unspoken acknowledgement. They shared moments of quiet laughter, gentle conversation, and mutual understanding, always careful, always respectful. Claire's heart was pulled in directions she hadn't expected. She loved Daniel, or at least the life she had with him. But she was learning that love wasn't always about certainty. Sometimes it was about awakening to your own feelings, your own desires, and the ways your heart refused to remain still. One rainy evening, Ethan knocked on Claire's door with a box of books she had requested from his collection. The rain tapped against the windows, creating a soft rhythm as they stood in the doorway, briefly sheltering together. Their hands brushed accidentally as they passed a book. Claire's heart skipped a beat, and she noticed Ethan's subtle pause, the unspoken recognition of the moment. They laughed softly, embarrassed by the intensity of such a small gesture. But the moment lingered far longer than either expected. "I'll be leaving soon," Ethan said quietly, voice heavy with unspoken feelings. "The house repairs are almost done, and I'll be heading back to Vancouver." Claire nodded, feeling an ache she hadn't anticipated. She wanted to ask him to stay, to delay the inevitable, but she didn't. She knew the boundaries they had respected, the lives they each had to return to. All she could do was savor the moments they had left. The day before Ethan's departure, they met at the pier one last time. The lake was calm, mirroring the soft colors of the sky. They stood together in silence, feeling the weight of words left unspoken, the emotions carefully restrained. Claire felt tears prick her eyes, but did not allow herself to cry. Ethan turned. To her, his expression tender and serious. "Claire," he said softly, "some people enter our lives not to stay, but to remind us of who we are, to show us what we've forgotten or never knew about ourselves." Claire nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "You've reminded me of so many things I didn't know I had lost." They shared a quiet smile, heavy with emotion. Then slowly, without rushing, Ethan turned and walked away. Claire watched him disappear down the path, feeling both broken and whole at the same time. She realized that love could be quiet, subtle, and transformative without needing to disrupt or destroy what already existed. Sometimes love was simply about awakening the heart. Weeks later, Claire and Daniel left Maple Harbor for Chicago. The house was empty, boxes stacked neatly, memories packed away carefully. Daniel was enthusiastic, ready to embrace new opportunities, unaware of the quiet shift within his wife. Claire smiled politely, her mind and heart carrying Ethan's presence in a way that no one could see. She felt gratitude, longing, and a new sense of self all at once. Claire knew the story didn't end with dramatic choices or sudden confessions. Fate had worked quietly, gently, shaping her understanding of herself and the world around her. Ethan hadn't been her husband, but he had been something far more subtle and enduring, a mirror to her heart, a reminder of the depths of feeling she still possessed as the plane lifted off the ground. Taking them toward Chicago, Claire looked out the window at Maple Harbor fading beneath the clouds. The pier, the lake, the quiet streets all remained, holding memories of gentle encounters, soft laughter, and unspoken truths. She realized that some people were not meant to stay, but the lessons and emotions they brought would follow forever. Claire felt a mixture of sadness and hope. This strange exhilaration of endings and beginnings intertwined. She had loved and been reminded of herself, and though Ethan was gone, his presence had changed her. Her heart was no longer quiet. It was awake, alive, and ready for whatever came next. And so the chapter of Maple Harbor closed quietly, with Claire moving forward into a life she had chosen, carrying with her the delicate truths that only fate could have given, a reminder that love, in all its forms, could exist quietly, profoundly, and forever in the heart, even when it did not follow the path we expected.